Sir, I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to just stand there. Emily Carter's voice cracked as the words left her mouth aimed at a stranger she had every reason to fear. Her phone was dead, her father's house was empty, and somewhere behind her, headlights had circled the station twice. She never expected the man with the Hells Angels patch to be the only person willing to stop. If you're watching this story right now, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. Then subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end, because what happens next will change how you see people forever. The last train to Phoenix pulled away from the Prescott Junction platform at 11:47 p.m., and Emily Carter watched its red taillights shrink into the darkness with a hollow feeling spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the cold desert air. She had missed it by 90 seconds. 90 seconds. She stood frozen on the cracked concrete platform, her suitcase handle still gripped in her fist, replaying the moment over and over. The rideshare driver who canceled on her twice. The wrong turn near the gas station. The elderly woman at the ticket counter who moved like time didn't matter to her, unaware that for Emily, every second did. No, 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 no. Emily whispered the words like a prayer that might reverse what had already happened. She turned in a slow circle, scanning the empty platform, as if another train might materialize out of sheer desperation. Nothing but flickering fluorescent lights and a rusted bench answered her. Her phone buzzed weakly in her palm. 4% battery. Come on, just work. Just give me one call, she muttered, jabbing at the screen with trembling fingers. She dialed the only number she trusted in this town, though trust was a generous word for a man she'd spoken to exactly once in 15 years. It rang twice before a robotic voice informed her the number was no longer in service. Emily lowered the phone slowly, her stomach twisting into a knot. Of course it wasn't in service. Nothing about this trip had gone the way she imagined. 3 hours earlier, she had stood on the cracked sidewalk of 214 Larkspur Avenue, staring at a house with boarded windows and a for sale sign leaning sideways in an overgrown yard. The address she had carried in her wallet for 8 months, the address she'd whispered to herself like a lifeline through countless, sleepless nights while caring for her dying mother, led to nothing but silence and dust. She had knocked anyway. She had knocked 3 times, each one louder than the last, some desperate part of her still hoping her father might open the door and finally explain why he'd vanished from her life when she was 12 years old. No one answered because no one lived there. According to the neighbor who eventually poked her head out, the house had been empty for over a year. He's not here anymore, honey, the neighbor had said, not unkindly. Family that owned it before moved out east somewhere. I don't know where your daddy went. Emily hadn't cried then. She'd been too numb. She was crying now, alone on a train platform at midnight in a town she didn't know, chasing a ghost that had already slipped through her fingers a second time. Her phone buzzed again. 2%. She needed a plan. She needed a taxi, a hotel, anything. She opened her rideshare app with shaking hands and requested a car, watching the little icon spin and spin and spin before finally displaying the words, "No drivers available in your area." You have got to be kidding me, she breathed. She tried calling a local taxi number she found through a frantic search, her thumb slipping twice before she managed to dial correctly. It rang and rang and rang, no answer. She tried a second number, same result. A third. This time a recording informed her the office was closed until 6 in the morning. Emily lowered herself onto the metal bench suitcase between her knees and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Okay, she whispered to herself. Okay, think. You've been through worse than this. Had she, though? She'd survived 4 years of watching her mother waste away from cancer. She'd survived being my one who signed the final paperwork, who chose the flowers, who stood alone at the funeral because there was no father to stand beside her. She'd survived loneliness that ate at her bones for years. But she had never survived being stranded alone at midnight in a town where she knew absolutely no one. Her phone buzzed a final time and went dark. Emily stared at the black screen in her hand like it had betrayed her personally. That was when she heard the engine, not the deep rumble she would come to recognize later. Not yet. This was different. A low, throaty growl that didn't belong to any train. She lifted her head just as a pair of headlights swept across the parking lot beyond the platform. A dark pickup truck rolled in slow, deliberate circles. Emily's pulse quickened. She told herself it was nothing. Just someone lost, someone turning around, someone with absolutely no interest in a stranded woman sitting alone on a bench. The truck circled a second time. This time it slowed as it passed the platform, and Emily could see two silhouettes inside both heads turned in her direction. Her breath caught in her throat. "Just keep driving," she whispered under her breath, gripping the edge of the bench so hard her knuckles turned white. "Please, just keep driving." The truck didn't keep driving. It rolled to a stop at the edge of the lot, engine idling, headlights aimed directly at her like two accusing eyes. Emily stood up so fast her suitcase toppled over. She didn't bother picking it up. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to move, to put distance between herself and that truck, though there was nowhere on this abandoned platform to actually go. "Hey!" A man's voice called out from the truck, muffled by the distance, but clear enough to send ice through her veins. "Hey, you need a ride somewhere?" Emily said nothing. She backed toward the ticket booth, though she already knew it was locked and dark and useless. "Come on, we're not going to hurt you," the second voice added, and something about the way he said it made her stomach flip, because people who meant that never had to say it out loud. The truck door opened. Emily's mind raced through every terrible headline she'd ever read about women disappearing from train stations, about strangers who seemed harmless until they weren't, about towns where nobody would hear you scream. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice shaking despite her attempt to sound strong. "I'm calling the police." "With what phone?" The first man laughed, a low, ugly sound that confirmed he'd been watching her long enough to know her phone was dead. That was the moment Emily truly understood how alone she was. And that was the exact moment the second engine arrived. It came from the opposite direction, a deep rolling thunder that vibrated through the concrete beneath her feet before she even saw the headlight. It wasn't loud in an aggressive way. It was loud in a way that announced presence, the way distant storm clouds announce rain before a single drop falls. The two men by the truck froze. Emily turned toward the sound, half terrified. It might be a third threat joining the first two, and instead saw a single motorcycle roll into the lot with unhurried confidence, headlight cutting cleanly through the darkness. The rider parked at an angle that placed the bike directly between Emily and the pickup truck, though she would only realize the deliberateness of that positioning later. He killed the engine. Silence rushed back into the space, thick and heavy, broken only by Emily's own ragged breathing. The rider swung one leg over the seat and stood tall and unhurried, removing his helmet, with the calm of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Emily's eyes caught on the patch stitched across the back of his leather vest before she registered anything else about him. Hell's Angles, bold red letters over white, unmistakable, notorious, exactly the kind of image that had been drilled into her through movies and news segments and secondhand warnings her entire life. Her stomach dropped. She had just traded two threatening strangers for what every part of her upbringing told her was something far worse. "Everything all right over here?" The man asked, his voice low and even, directed not at Emily, but at the two men still frozen by their truck. "This ain't your business, Logan," the first man said, and Emily noticed the way his tone shifted from mocking to cautious the instant he recognized who had arrived. "Made it my business the second I saw you circling a woman sitting alone at midnight," Logan replied, his tone never rising, never sharpening, simply stating a fact the way another man might comment on the weather. Emily's eyes darted between the three men, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. "We were just offering her a ride," the second man said, though his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "Funny," Logan said. "Didn't look like she wanted one." Nobody moved for a long moment. Emily held her breath, certain the situation was seconds from erupting into violence, certain she was about to witness something no amount of preparation could have readied her for. Instead, the first man muttered something under his breath, climbed back into the truck, and the engine roared to life. Within seconds, the vehicle reversed out of the lot and disappeared down the dark road, taillights fading exactly the way the trains had less than half an hour earlier. Emily exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Then she remembered who was standing 10 feet away from her, and the fear returned in a fresh wave. "You all right?" Logan asked, turning toward her fully for the first time. Emily took an involuntary step backward, bumping into the toppled suitcase behind her. "I'm fine," she said quickly, the words tumbling out sharper than she intended. "Thank you. You can go now." Something flickered across Logan's face, not offense, but a kind of tired understanding, as though he'd heard those exact words from exact strangers more times than he could count. "Ma'am, it's almost midnight," he said. "Train station's closed. Nearest hotel's 11 miles that way, and I'm guessing you don't have a bomb or you wouldn't have been sitting on that bench." Emily said nothing because everything he said was true, and she hated that it was true. "I'm not going to hurt you." he added, and though the words were identical to what the man in the truck had said minutes earlier, something in the way Logan said them landed completely differently. There was no smugness in it, no implied threat hiding behind casual phrasing, just a plain statement offered without demand for her to believe it. That's exactly what people say right before they do, Emily said, unable to stop the words from escaping. Logan studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly as if her fear made perfect sense to him. Fair enough, he said. Tell you what, I'll stand right here. You call whoever you need to call, use whatever time you need, and if you decide you'd rather wait out here alone all night, I'll get on my bike and leave you to it. No hard feelings. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the offer. My phone's dead, she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. Logan reached into the saddlebag on his motorcycle and pulled out a portable charger, holding it toward her at arm's length, the gesture deliberately unhurried so she could see exactly what it was before he moved closer. Take it, he said. I'll back up 10 feet if it makes you feel better. He did exactly that, stepping backward without being asked twice, giving her space to approach on her own terms. Emily hesitated, glancing at the dark road where the truck had vanished, then at the man now standing a careful distance away with his hands visible at his sides. She stepped forward and took the charger. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't mention it, Logan replied. She plugged her phone in with shaking fingers and watched the screen flicker back to life. The moment it did, she immediately opened her rideshare app again, praying for a different result than before. Still no drivers available. She tried the taxi numbers again. Still no answer. Frustration and exhaustion collided inside her chest, and for the first time since the train pulled away, tears threatened to spill over. There a hotel around here I could walk to? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Closest one's the 11 miles I mentioned, Logan said, and walking that stretch of road at night isn't something I'd recommend for anybody, especially not alone. Great, Emily muttered, dragging a hand across her face. So my options are freeze on a bench until sunrise or walk 11 miles in the dark. There's a third option, Logan said carefully. Emily's eyes snapped up to him, wary instantly. I run a repair shop about 10 minutes from here, he continued. Got a back office with a couch, a working heater, and a lock on the inside of the door. You're welcome to wait there till morning, till you can get a car or a bus or whatever gets you where you're going. I'll be out front the whole time. You don't have to talk to me, don't have to trust me, don't have to do anything but stay warm and safe till daylight. Emily searched his face for any sign of deception, any flicker that might confirm every warning she'd ever absorbed about men who looked like him. She found none, only steady, patient honesty. Why would you do that? She asked. You don't know me. Logan considered the question for a moment before answering. Because somebody did it for me once, he said, and I told myself a long time ago I'd never drive past somebody who needed the same thing. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her more than any elaborate explanation could have. I have pepper spray, Emily blurted out, immediately embarrassed by how defensive it sounded. Good, Logan said without a trace of mockery. Keep it in your hand the whole way there if you want. I won't take it personal. Something about his willingness to accept her fear rather than dismiss it cracked something open in Emily's chest. Still, she hesitated. I don't even know your last name, she said. Walker, he answered immediately. Logan Walker, served 8 years in the Army before I came home and started fixing bikes for a living. You can look me up if you've got enough battery left. Shop's called Walker's Custom Cycles. Been there 12 years. Ask anybody in this town, they'll tell you who I am. Emily glanced down at her phone, now at 11%, and quickly typed his name and the shop into a search engine. A business listing appeared instantly complete with reviews, an address, and photographs of a modest garage with motorcycles lined up outside. The top review, posted 8 months earlier, read, Logan fixed my bike for free after I told him I couldn't afford the parts. Man's a saint. Wouldn't trust anybody else in this town. Emily read 3 more reviews, all echoing similar sentiments, before finally lowering her phone. It didn't erase her fear entirely, but it dulled the sharpest edge of it. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll go, but I'm keeping my pepper spray out. Wouldn't expect anything less, Logan said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly for the first time. He retrieved a spare helmet from his motorcycle's rear compartment and held it out to her. You know how to ride? He asked. No, Emily admitted. Then hold on tight and trust the bike, he said. I'll go slow. Emily stared at the helmet in her hands for a long moment, then at the man waiting patiently beside his motorcycle, then at the empty, hostile darkness stretching in every direction around the abandoned station. She thought of her mother, who used to tell her that fear was only useful when it kept you from real danger, not when it kept you from every uncertain thing. She thought of the empty house on Larkspur Avenue, the address that led nowhere, the father who had vanished twice now, first from her childhood and now from this desperate, foolish trip she'd taken hoping for answers that no longer existed. She thought about how badly she wanted just once for someone to actually show up when she needed them. Emily put on the helmet. "If you try anything," she said, climbing carefully onto the seat behind him, "I swear to God I will make you regret it." "Wouldn't expect anything less of that either," Logan said, and there was no mockery in his voice, only quiet respect. The engine roared to life beneath her, and Emily wrapped her arms around a stranger's waist, her heart pounding from a mixture of fear and something else she couldn't quite name yet as the motorcycle pulled away from the platform where she had been utterly alone just minutes before. The wind rushed past her face cold and sharp, carrying away some of the panic that had gripped her since the train disappeared into the night. They rode in silence for several minutes, passing dark stretches of desert road, illuminated only by the motorcycle's headlight, and a wash of stars overhead that Emily hadn't noticed until now, too consumed by fear to look up. She noticed them now. It was strange, she thought, how a sky full of stars could feel both enormous and comforting at the exact same time, the way the whole night had shifted from something threatening into something else entirely, though she wasn't ready yet to call it safe. Logan slowed as they approached a cluster of buildings just off the main road, one of them marked by a lit sign reading Walker's Custom Cycles motorcycles parked in neat rows along the front, a single porch light glowing above the entrance like a small beacon in the darkness. He pulled into the gravel lot and cut the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "We're here," Logan said finally. Emily climbed off slowly, her legs unsteady, and removed the helmet with hands that hadn't fully stopped shaking. "Thank you," she said again, the words feeling inadequate for everything that had just happened. "Don't thank me yet," Logan replied, walking toward the shop entrance. "Wait till you see the couch. Cushions are older than I am." Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and fear and grief still lodged, somewhere deep in her chest, Emily felt the faintest, most unexpected urge to laugh. She followed him toward the door, glancing back once at the dark road behind her, half expecting the pickup truck to reappear out of nowhere. It didn't. The night remained empty and silent, save for the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes and the steady presence of the man walking a few feet ahead of her, a man wearing a patch. She had been taught her entire life to fear a man who had just done the one thing nobody else in this town had been willing to do. He had stopped. As Logan reached for the door handle, he paused and looked back at her as if sensing her hesitation. "Last chance," he said quietly. "You don't have to come in. I can call you a real cab from the shop phone. Might take an hour, but I can call one if that's what you want." Emily looked at the door, then at him, then back down the dark road toward the station, where two dangerous strangers had circled her like predators only minutes before. "No," she said finally. "I'll stay." Logan nodded, once pushed the door open and stepped aside to let her enter first. Emily crossed the threshold into the warm light of the shop, unaware that this single decision made out of exhaustion and desperation on the worst night of her adult life was about to unravel everything she thought she understood about family, about fear, and about the address on Larkspur Avenue that had led her here in the first place. Because the empty house wasn't the end of her father's story, it was only the beginning of someone else's. The warmth hit Emily first, a wave of heat from a space heater humming in the corner, so different from the biting cold she'd just left behind that her whole body seemed to exhale at once. "Sit wherever," Logan said, closing the door behind them and locking it with a deliberate click that Emily noticed and appreciated, though she said nothing about it. "Couch, chair, floor, not picky in here." Emily stood just inside the entrance, taking in the space with cautious eyes, her earlier terror slowly giving way to something closer to wary curiosity. She had expected grease-stained walls, maybe a girly calendar, the kind of rough, masculine clutter she associated with garages and the men who ran them. Instead, she found herself staring at a wall covered in photographs. "You can look," Logan said, noticing her gaze. "Nothing in here's a secret." She stepped closer, drawn despite herself. Dozens of photographs, some faded, some recent, filled a corkboard that stretched nearly the length of the wall. Men and women standing beside motorcycles. Children on tiny bikes with training wheels. A group photo of at least 30 riders gathered outside a hospital, all wearing matching vests, all smiling despite the somber building behind them. "What is this?" Emily asked. 12 years of memories, Logan said, moving toward a small kitchenette tucked into the corner. "Coffee. I don't want to impose." You already did that when you climbed on my bike, he said not unkindly. Might as well have coffee while you're at it. Emily almost smiled. Almost. Fine, coffee. She turned back to the wall while he worked her eyes catching on a framed photograph slightly larger than the others. A young man in military fatigues, achingly thin, standing beside an older man with a gray beard and the same Hell's Angels patch Logan wore now. Is that you? She asked. Logan glanced over his shoulder and something shifted in his expression, a flicker of memory crossing his face before he answered. Yeah, that's me. 23 years old, 3 weeks after I got back from my last deployment. You look, Emily paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound insulting. Broken, Logan finished for her. It's fine, you can say it. I was. Emily turned fully toward him, now her curiosity outweighing her caution. What happened? Logan poured hot water over instant coffee grounds, his movements slow and deliberate, the way a man moves when he's telling a story he's told 100 times but still feels the weight of every time. Came home from my second tour and didn't have much waiting for me, he said. Parents passed while I was overseas. No siblings, no wife, no kids. Whatever savings I had went to hospital bills after I got hurt during my last deployment. Ended up sleeping in my truck in a parking lot behind a diner for about 4 months. Emily's chest tightened unexpectedly. Nobody knew, she asked. Plenty of people probably suspected, Logan said, handing her a chipped mug. Nobody asked. That's the thing people don't understand about being invisible. It's not that nobody sees you, it's that everybody decides not to look too close. Emily wrapped both hands around the warm mug, saying nothing because she understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. So what changed? She asked. Logan gestured toward the photograph. That man right there, Frank Delgado. Man practically ran this town's chapter of Hell's Angels back then. Found me one night going through the dumpster behind that diner looking for anything I could sell. Didn't judge me, didn't lecture me, just walked up and asked if I'd eaten that day. What did you say? Told him to mind his own business. Logan said, a small laugh escaping, despite the weight of the memory. Man just laughed, went inside the diner, bought 2 plates of food, and sat down across from me at that dumpster like it was the finest restaurant in Arizona. Emily felt something tighten in her throat. He didn't say much that first night, Logan continued. Just ate with me. Told me his own story, how he'd been exactly where I was 20 years earlier. Second night, he showed up again. Third night, same thing. By the end of that week, he offered me a cot in the back of this exact shop. This shop, same one. Frank owned it before I did. Taught me everything I know about fixing bikes. Took 2 years, but eventually I had enough saved to get my own place. Another 3 years after that, Frank got sick, and he asked me to take over the shop permanently. Is he? Emily hesitated. Passed 4 years ago, Logan said quietly. Heart gave out, buried him with his vest on like he wanted. Emily glanced back at the photograph, seeing it differently now, understanding the weight behind 2 men standing side by side in front of a building that represented far more than motorcycles and repairs. That's why you stopped. Tonight, she said slowly. Isn't it? Logan met her eyes directly. Told myself the day I buried Frank that I'd never drive past anybody who looked like I did that night behind the diner. Didn't matter if it was a stranded veteran or a scared woman on a train platform. Same principle. Emily lowered her gaze to the coffee in her hands, unsure what to say to something so plainly unapologetically sincere. Most people would have just called it in and moved on, she said finally. Most people didn't spend 4 months eating out of dumpsters, Logan replied simply. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with everything unsaid. Emily took a slow sip of coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness. Bad? Logan asked, watching her reaction. Terrible, Emily admitted. Frank always said terrible coffee builds character, Logan said. Personally, I think he just never learned to make it properly. This time Emily did laugh, a small surprise sound that seemed to catch her off guard as much as it did him. The moment broke something loose between them, some invisible tension easing just slightly, though Emily's guard remained mostly intact. Years of caution, not so easily undone by one act of kindness and a cup of bad coffee. Can I ask you something? Logan said, setting his own mug down on the counter. Emily tensed slightly. Depends what it is. What were you doing at that train station tonight? Town like Prescott Junction doesn't get many blonde women from out of state wandering around alone after dark. Emily's fingers tightened around her mug. It's complicated, she said. Most true stories are Logan replied, not pushing, simply leaving the door open. Emily stared into her coffee for a long moment, weighing how much of herself she was willing to hand over to a stranger she'd known for less than an hour. A stranger wearing a patch that still made every instinct in her body flare with caution despite everything he'd just shared. "I came here looking for my father," she said finally. Logan didn't react with surprise or pity, simply waited, giving her room to continue at her own pace. "He left when I was 12, Emily continued. "No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone one morning like he'd never existed. My mom never talked about it, never explained why. I used to think maybe he died, maybe there was some tragic reason, because the alternative that he simply chose to leave felt too painful to accept." "What made you come looking now?" Logan asked. Emily's jaw tightened. "My mother passed 8 months ago," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "Cancer. I took care of her for 4 years. Watched her get smaller and smaller until there wasn't much left of the woman who raised me." "I'm sorry," Logan said quietly, the words simple but genuine. "After she died, I found a box of old letters in her closet," Emily continued. "Letters my father sent over the years, ones he asked her to give me when I was older. She never gave them to me. I don't know if it was anger or protection or something else entirely, but she kept them hidden for 15 years. "What did they say?" "Mostly apologies," Emily said. "Vague ones. Never really explained why he left, just that he was sorry that he thought about me, that he hoped one day I'd understand. The last letter had an address in it, Arizona, this town." "So you came here expecting what exactly?" Logan asked gently. "I don't know," Emily admitted, her voice cracking slightly for the first time since she'd started talking. "Answers, maybe. Some explanation that would finally make sense of why he left. Or maybe just to see his face one more time and ask him myself instead of reading vague apologies scribbled on paper. And instead I found an empty house," Emily said, bitterness creeping into her voice. "A neighbor who told me the family that lived there moved away over a year ago. Nobody even knew where." Logan absorbed this in silence, his expression unreadable for a long moment. "That's a hell of a thing to chase for 15 years, only to hit a dead end," he said finally. "Story of my life," Emily muttered, setting her coffee down harder than she intended. "You know," Logan said carefully, "sometimes the people we spend years chasing aren't actually who we think they are anymore. 15 years changes a person. Might be the man you're looking for isn't even the same man who wrote those letters." Emily looked up sharply. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" "Not particularly," Logan admitted. "Just true." Something about his blunt honesty rather than empty platitudes settled something restless in Emily's chest. "I don't even know why I'm telling you this," she said, shaking her head. "I met you 2 hours ago." "Sometimes it's easier telling things to strangers," Logan said. "No history, no expectations, no judgment waiting on the other side." Emily studied him for a long moment, something in his tone suggesting he understood that principle from personal experience, not just observation. "Is that what Frank was to you?" she asked. "A stranger you could tell things to?" Logan's expression softened slightly. "Frank became a lot more than a stranger," he said. "But yeah, that first night behind the dumpster, that's exactly what he was. Sometimes that's all a person needs. Just one person willing to listen without an agenda." A sudden knock at the shop's front door shattered the quiet moment, sharp and unexpected, sending Emily's heart into her throat instantly. She jumped, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her mug. "Easy," Logan said, immediately alert but calm, moving toward the door with measured steps. "Probably just Marcus doing his rounds." "Rounds?" Emily's voice came out higher than she intended. "Neighborhood watch, more or less," Logan said, glancing through the small window beside the door before unlocking it. "Some of the guys check on the shop overnight, especially after we had a break-in a couple years back." He opened the door to reveal a heavy-set man in his 50s, gray beard matching vest expression, immediately shifting to concern upon seeing Emily standing tense near the couch. "Everything all right, Logan?" the man asked, eyes flicking between them. "We're good, Marcus," Logan said. "Picked up a stranded traveler at the station. Truck full of trouble was circling her." Marcus's expression darkened instantly. "The gray truck, been seeing that thing around town all week. Chuck Reeves and his cousin, probably. Boy's been nothing but trouble since they got back from wherever they disappeared to." Emily's stomach dropped at the confirmation that the threat had a name, a history, a pattern. "You know them?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Unfortunately," Marcus said, stepping fully into the shop and closing the door behind him. Chuck's been in and out of trouble for years, nothing that ever sticks but enough that everybody in town knows to steer clear. Should I be worried they'll come back? Emily asked, glancing toward the door as if the truck might materialize on the other side of it. Not while you're here, Logan said firmly. Chuck's a lot of things, but he's not stupid enough to mess with this shop. Learned that lesson the hard way a while back. What happened? Emily asked, though something in Logan's expression told her she might not want the full answer. Tried breaking in about 2 years ago, Marcus said before Logan could answer. Thought the place would be empty overnight. Didn't realize half the local chapter uses this shop as a meeting spot most weekends. Boys showed up mid-robbery. What happened to him? Emily asked cautiously. Nothing happened to him, Logan said. We called the police, gave a full statement, let the law handle it properly. Chuck spent 6 months in county lockup. Been holding a grudge ever since, apparently. Emily absorbed this information slowly, feeling the pieces shift slightly, her fear reshaping itself into something closer to unease rather than outright terror. So this isn't random, she said. He might have recognized me as someone alone and vulnerable, specifically because he knew nobody would step in. Except somebody did, Logan said simply. Marcus glanced between them, sensing an undercurrent he wasn't fully part of, then cleared his throat. I'll do another loop around the block. Make sure that truck's not lingering nearby, he said. You need anything, radios on Channel 4 like always. Appreciate it, Marcus, Logan said, walking him back toward the door. Once Marcus disappeared into the darkness outside, Logan locked the door again, testing the handle twice before turning back toward Emily. You okay? He asked. Not really, Emily admitted, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warmth of the room. Feels like everything that's happened tonight just got a lot more real. For what it's worth, Logan said, you're safer in this shop right now than you'd be almost anywhere else in this town. Why does that feel like such a strange thing to hear? Emily said, half laughing, despite the tension still coiled in her chest. Considering 3 hours ago I would have crossed the street to avoid a place like this. Logan's mouth curved into something between a smile and a knowing look. Most people would have, he said. Funny how quick that changes when you actually need somebody to show up. Emily sat back down, slowly processing everything, the exhaustion of the day finally beginning to catch up with the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Can I ask you something else? She said. Go ahead. Those photographs on the wall, she said, gesturing toward the corkboard. The hospital picture, the kids on bikes. What's that all about? Logan's expression shifted into something warmer, more animated than she'd seen from him yet. Every year we run a charity event for kids with serious illnesses, he said. Terminal cases mostly. Kids who might not get many more birthdays. We build them custom mini bikes, take them on escorted rides through town, sometimes coordinate with hospitals for kids too sick to leave their beds, and just ride slow circles past their windows so they can watch. Emily blinked, caught entirely off guard by the image forming in her mind. You do that every year? 12 years running, Logan said. Started it the year after Frank passed. Felt like something he would have wanted. That's, Emily struggled to find words adequate for what she was feeling. That's not at all what I expected. Most people don't expect it, Logan said, no bitterness in his tone, simply acknowledgement of a familiar pattern. See the patch, assume the worst, never stick around long enough to see the rest of it. I'm sorry, Emily said quietly, for assuming. Don't apologize, Logan said. You had every reason to be cautious tonight. World's full of people who would take advantage of exactly the situation you were in. Doesn't make sense to fault you for protecting yourself. Emily studied him for a long moment, something shifting in her chest that she couldn't quite name, yet some softening she hadn't expected and wasn't entirely sure she was ready for. Tell me about the veterans, she said suddenly. You mentioned restoring bikes for disabled veterans. Logan's expression grew more serious, more personal. Started about 8 years ago, he said. Guy came through town, lost both legs in an IED explosion overseas. Used to be an avid rider before his injury figured that part of his life was over permanently. Somebody in the chapter knew a mechanic who specialized in adaptive controls for motorcycles' hand-operated systems that let veterans with missing limbs ride safely again. And you helped him. Took about 4 months, but yeah, got him back on 2 wheels. Man cried like a baby the first time he took that bike out on the open road again. How many veterans have you helped since then? Lost count somewhere past 30, Logan said. Word spreads. Guys hear about a place that won't charge them a dime, that understands exactly what they're carrying, and they show up from 3 states away sometimes. Emily sat in stunned silence, the picture of the man in front of her, reshaping itself entirely from the image she'd carried into this shop just an hour earlier. Why doesn't anybody know about this? She asked. Why isn't this all over the news, all over social media? Logan shrugged the gesture casual, but carrying weight behind it. Never really cared about credit, he said. Frank used to say the moment you start doing good things for recognition, you've already lost the point of doing them. Emily felt something crack open further inside her chest, something that had been closed off and guarded for years, finally loosening just slightly. My mother used to say something similar, she said softly. Kindness with strings attached isn't really kindness. Sounds like a smart woman, Logan said. She was, Emily replied, her voice catching slightly. I miss her every single day. The room fell quiet again, comfortable this time, two strangers sharing space in a way that felt less like strangers and more like something neither of them had a name for yet. Can I show you something? Logan asked suddenly. Emily hesitated, cautious instincts flickering briefly before curiosity won out. Okay, she said. Logan led her toward the back room she hadn't noticed before, flipping on a light switch to reveal a workshop space filled with motorcycles in various stages of restoration. But it was the far corner that caught her attention immediately, a small bike clearly designed for a child painted bright purple with hand-painted butterflies along the fuel tank. Who's this for? Emily asked, moving closer. Little girl named Sophie, Logan said, his voice softening considerably. 6 years old, diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia last spring. Doctors gave her family a rough timeline. Emily's throat tightened instantly. Her older brother told us she used to love watching motorcycles pass by their house before she got sick. Logan continued. Couldn't ride a real one, obviously, but we're building this so she can sit on it, feel like she's really riding, take pictures with the whole chapter around her like she's one of us. When are you giving it to her? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This weekend, Logan said. Doctors said she's had a rough couple weeks. Family wants to make sure she gets to experience this before. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Emily reached out and touched the handlebar gently, imagining a small, sick child sitting proudly atop this bike, surrounded by dozens of bikers who had chosen, despite everything the world assumed about them, to spend their time and money bringing joy into her final days. Can I help? Emily asked, suddenly surprising herself with the question. Logan looked at her, genuine surprise crossing his features. Help with what? This, Sophie's bike. I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I'm good with my hands. I used to paint with my mother when I was younger. I could help with details, finishing touches, anything really. Logan studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. You don't have to do that, he said. You've had one hell of a night already. I know I don't have to, Emily said. I want to. Something shifted in the room, subtle but undeniable, the weight of the entire night settling into something that felt less like an emergency and more like an unexpected turning point. Before Logan could respond, a sharp buzzing sound erupted from the radio mounted near the workshop entrance, Marcus's voice crackling through with unmistakable urgency. Logan, you copy trucks back. Same gray pickup. Parked about a block from the shop engine, off, lights out. Looks like they're waiting on something. Emily's blood ran cold instantly, the fragile warmth of the last hour shattering in a single heartbeat. Logan's entire demeanor shifted, the relaxed openness from moments earlier, hardening into something sharp and focused. Copy that, he said into the radio. Keep eyes on them. Don't approach alone. He turned to Emily, his expression calm but unmistakably serious. They shouldn't be able to know you're here, he said carefully. Which means either they followed us from the station somehow or... He didn't finish the thought, but Emily saw the realization dawn across his face at the exact moment it dawned across hers. Or somebody told them, she finished, her voice barely a whisper. The radio crackled again. Marcus's voice, tighter this time, edged with something that sounded uncomfortably close to alarm. Logan, there's a third guy in the truck now, just got out. Says he's looking for a woman named Emily Carter. Says he's her father. Emily's father. The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs entirely. She stood frozen in the middle of the workshop, staring at the radio, as if it might somehow retract what it had just announced. That's not possible, she whispered. Logan's eyes stayed locked on hers, watching every flicker of reaction crossing her face. You're sure? He asked, though the question wasn't really for her. He keyed the radio again. Marcus, get a description. Static crackled for a few agonizing seconds before Marcus's voice returned tighter, now more clipped. Older guy, maybe 60, gray hair, thin build. Says his name is Richard Carter. Says he's been trying to find his daughter for months. Emily's knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the workbench to steady herself, her mind spinning too fast to land on any single coherent thought. That's him, she said, barely audible. That's my father's name. How would he know you're here? Logan asked, his voice steady but his eyes sharp with suspicion. You said the house was empty. Nobody there. How does a man who abandoned that address over a year ago suddenly show up at my shop the same night you do? I don't know, Emily said, panic rising in her throat. I don't know. Think, Logan pressed gently, not unkindly but urgently. Did you tell anyone where you were going tonight? Post anything, mention it to anyone? Emily's mind raced backward through the last 24 hours, through the bus ride, the neighbor's conversation, the frantic search for the address. The neighbor, she breathed suddenly. The woman at the house. I gave her my name when I asked about the family that used to live there. Told her I was looking for my father, gave her my name in case she remembered anything. And she could have called him, Logan said slowly, the pieces assembling themselves. Which means he's been somewhere close by this whole time, maybe even still in contact with people in this town. Why wouldn't he just come to the door himself? Emily said, her voice cracking. Why show up with two men who looked like they wanted to hurt me? Logan's jaw tightened. That's the part that doesn't sit right, he said. A father looking for his daughter doesn't need muscle, doesn't circle a train station twice before making contact. Emily felt sick. The two men at the station, the truck, the silhouettes staring at her in the dark. Had they known who she was the entire time? Had this been deliberate from the very beginning? The radio crackled again. Logan, he's asking to come inside. Says he just wants to talk to her. Says it's been 15 years and he deserves 5 minutes. Emily's chest heaved. 15 years of unanswered questions, of imagined reunions, of rehearsed speeches she'd never gotten to deliver, all colliding now into a moment she hadn't prepared for, hadn't wanted, not like this. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Logan crouched slightly to meet her eyes directly, his voice low and steady. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said. Not tonight, not like this. You say the word and I go out there and tell him to leave. That's it. End of story. Emily searched his face, finding no trace of pressure, no hint that he wanted her to choose one way or another. Just the same calm patience he'd offered her at the train station hours earlier. But you don't think I should send him away, she said, reading something beneath his careful neutrality. Logan hesitated. I think, he said slowly, that 15 years of questions doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient timing. But I also think whatever's happening out there right now with those other two men circling around doesn't smell right. Something's off. Emily closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe, forcing the panic in her chest to settle into something she could actually think through. I want to see him, she said, finally opening her eyes, but not alone and not with those other men anywhere near me. Logan nodded once, decisive. Then that's exactly how it's going to happen. He keyed the radio again. Marcus, tell him he can come to the door alone. The other two stay by the truck. Anybody moves wrong, you call it in immediately. Copy, Marcus responded. Logan turned back to Emily, the workshop's fluorescent light casting sharp shadows across his face. Stay close to me, he said. Whatever happens, whatever he says, you don't have to face this by yourself. Emily nodded, though her entire body trembled with a mixture of fear and something achingly close to hope, the same fragile hope she'd carried across 3 states in countless sleepless nights, refusing to fully die even now. They walked back toward the front of the shop together. Emily's legs feeling disconnected from her body, every step feeling both impossibly slow and terrifyingly fast. Through the window beside the door, she saw him. Richard Carter looked nothing like the photograph she'd carried in her memory for 15 years. The one faded image of a younger man laughing at a barbecue, holding a 12-year-old Emily on his shoulders. This man was thinner, grayer, his shoulders hunched in a way that spoke of years she hadn't witnessed, years that had clearly not been kind to him. But his eyes, when they landed on her through the glass, were unmistakably the same. Emily, he breathed, his voice muffled through the door, but carrying enough emotion to reach her regardless. Emily, is that really you? Emily's hand hovered near the door handle, frozen. Take your time, Logan murmured beside her. She unlocked the door slowly and opened it just enough to see him fully, his hands raised slightly, palms visible, a gesture that seemed deliberately unthreatening. Dad, Emily whispered the word, feeling foreign and impossibly heavy on her tongue after 15 years of silence. Richard's eyes filled instantly with tears. I can't believe it's really you, he said. I've been looking for you for months, ever since I heard about your mother. Something cold slid through Emily's chest at the mention of her mother. How did you hear? She asked. We didn't have any contact information for you. Nobody knew where you were. Richard's gaze flickered just briefly toward the ground before returning to her face. I still have friends in Saddle, he said. Word travels. I'm so sorry, Emily. I know I have no right to say that considering everything, but I am. I truly am. Emily felt Logan shift slightly beside her, close enough that she could sense his continued attention on the two men still standing near the truck at the edge of the property, motionless, but watching. Why did you leave? Emily asked the question she'd carried for 15 years, finally escaping without any of the careful rehearsal she'd once planned. Why did you just disappear without a word? Richard's face crumpled slightly. It's complicated, he said. I made mistakes, Emily, terrible mistakes. I owed people money, dangerous people, and I thought leaving would protect you and your mother from whatever might come looking for me. You could have called, Emily said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. You could have written more than vague apologies. You could have explained, instead of leaving me to imagine every possible reason for 15 years. I know, Richard said, his voice breaking. I know, and I'm sorry. I thought about you every single day. Emily wanted to believe him. God, some desperate part of her, wanted so badly to believe him, to finally receive the explanation she'd craved for half her life. But something nagged at her, some instinct, sharpened by the last few hours, by the truck circling the station, by the timing that felt too convenient, too immediate. Why are you here right now? She asked. Tonight specifically. Why not months ago when you supposedly heard about Mom? Richard hesitated, and in that hesitation, Emily saw something shift behind his eyes. I've been trying to work up the courage, he said. I didn't know how to face you after everything. That's not an answer, Logan said quietly, speaking for the first time since Richard's arrival. Richard's eyes flicked toward him, some flash of irritation crossing his features, before smoothing back into practiced sincerity. And who exactly are you, he asked. Someone who found your daughter alone and scared at a train station tonight, Logan said evenly. Right around the same time, two men in a truck were circling her like they were waiting for something. Richard's jaw tightened. Those men are just friends helping me look for her, he said. Nothing more. Funny, Wasan, Logan said, because it looked a whole lot like they were casing her before they even knew who she was. Emily's stomach dropped as the implications settled fully into place. Wait, she said slowly, looking between the two men. Are you saying they didn't know I was his daughter until after they'd already started following me? Nobody answered immediately, the silence stretching taut and dangerous. Dad, Emily said, her voice hardening. Answer me. Did those men know who I was before tonight? Or did they just see a woman alone and decide to take advantage of it, only realizing afterward who I actually was? Richard's silence lasted a beat too long. It's not what you think, he finally said. Then tell me what it is, Emily demanded, her fear rapidly transforming into something sharper, angrier. Richard glanced nervously toward the two men still waiting by the truck, and Emily followed his gaze, noticing for the first time how they hadn't moved an inch, hadn't shown any of the concern a father's associates might show for a missing daughter's well-being. Those men, Richard said slowly, they're not exactly friends. They're business associates, people I owe money to. Emily's blood ran cold. The same people you said you left to protect us from, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard's silence confirmed everything before he even spoke the words. They found me a few months back, he admitted. Told me I had 30 days to pay back what I owed plus interest that's grown substantially over 15 years. I don't have that kind of money, Emily. I've never had that kind of money. So what does that have to do with me? Emily asked, though some horrifying part of her mind was already assembling the answer before he spoke it. They know about your mother's life insurance policy, Richard said, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. The one she took out years ago. I'm listed as a secondary beneficiary if something happens to you. The words landed like a physical blow. Emily staggered backward half a step, Logan's hand immediately steadying her elbow without hesitation. You're telling me, Emily said, her voice shaking with disbelief and rage in equal measure, that you brought dangerous men here tonight because you need money, and somewhere in whatever twisted plan you've constructed, my death benefits me dying. instead of you paying your own debts. No, Richard said quickly, panic flooding his features. No, that's not what I meant. I would never actually hurt you, Emily. I thought if I found you, brought you back into contact with the family, maybe there'd be a way to work something out. Maybe you could help me, lend me money, anything. You used my missing father story to search for me, Emily said slowly, horror dawning fully now. Not because you missed me, not because you cared what happened to me, but because you needed a way out of debt and I represented a possible solution. That's not entirely fair, Richard said, though his voice lacked any real conviction. Fair. Emily's voice cracked entirely now, 15 years of grief and hope shattering into something raw and furious. You want to talk about fair? I spent 15 years wondering what I did wrong, wondering if I wasn't good enough, wondering if you thought about me at all. And the truth is, you only came looking for me because you're in debt to dangerous men and thought I might be your way out. Richard's face crumpled, whether from genuine shame or simply the realization that his plan had unraveled entirely. Emily couldn't tell anymore, and honestly, she no longer cared to find out. One of the men by the truck suddenly straightened, taking a step forward. Richard, he called out, his voice carrying an edge of impatience. We don't have all night. Either she's helping or she's not. We need an answer. Logan's entire posture shifted instantly, protective and sharp. She's not helping with anything, Logan said, stepping slightly in front of Emily. And you two need to get back in that truck and leave before this becomes a much bigger problem than unpaid debts. This isn't your business, the second man said, moving forward as well, now his hand drifting toward his jacket pocket in a way that made Emily's entire body go rigid with fear. Made it my business the second you started threatening a woman on my property. Logan said, his voice dropping into something low and unmistakably dangerous, though his stance remained deliberately controlled. Emily heard the distinct sound of a motorcycle engine approaching from the distance, then another, then several more, the rumble growing steadily louder until headlights began sweeping across the gravel lot from multiple directions. Within moments, 5 more motorcycles rolled to a stop around the property, riders dismounting, with the same calm, deliberate confidence Logan had shown at the station hours earlier. Emily recognized Marcus among them, along with 4 others she'd never seen before, wearing the same Hell's Angels patch, all positioning themselves with quiet, coordinated purpose around the perimeter of the confrontation. The 2 men by the truck froze, their earlier bravado visibly crumbling under the sudden shift in numbers. We're not looking for trouble, the first man said quickly, his hand withdrawing from his jacket. Then you should have thought about that before circling a scared woman at midnight. One of the newly arrived riders said, his voice carrying easily across the lot. Richard stood frozen between his daughter and his creditors, caught in a moment of his own, making his face a mixture of fear and shame that Emily found she could no longer summon any sympathy for. Dad, Emily said quietly, her voice steady despite everything crumbling inside her. I need you to leave. Now, and don't come looking for me again. Emily, please, Richard said, his voice desperate now. I know I've made mistakes, but you're still my daughter. Doesn't that mean anything? It should have meant something 15 years ago, Emily said, her voice hardening with a finality that surprised even herself. It should have meant something when you walked out without a word. It should have meant something every single day. I wondered if I'd done something to drive you away. Don't you dare stand there now and ask if it means anything and after showing up only because you need money. Richard's shoulders sagged entirely, whatever remaining argument he'd prepared apparently dissolving under the weight of his daughter's words. I really am sorry, he said, barely audible. I believe that you're sorry for getting caught, Emily said. I don't believe you're sorry for leaving. The 2 men by the truck exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them before the first one spoke again. This isn't over, Richard, he said, his tone carrying quiet menace. You've still got 30 days. Family drama doesn't change what you owe. We'll discuss it elsewhere, Richard said, quickly casting one final glance toward Emily, something desperate and pleading in his expression that she refused to acknowledge. The 2 men climbed back into their truck, engine roaring to life as they reversed out of the lot, taillights disappearing down the same dark road that had swallowed them once before that night. Richard lingered a moment longer, his eyes searching Emily's face for some crack in her resolve, some sign that 15 years of absence might still be forgiven with enough desperate pleading. He found none. If you ever want to talk, he said quietly, I'm staying at the motel off Highway 89, room 12. Emily said nothing, watching in silence as her father walked slowly back toward the rusted sedan parked at the edge of the property, The same vehicle that had likely followed the truck here, or perhaps had been here all along, waiting for the right moment to make his entrance. The engine started, headed lights flickered on, and within moments, Richard Carter disappeared into the darkness exactly the way he had 15 years earlier, leaving Emily standing frozen in a gravel lot surrounded by strangers who had shown her more genuine concern in a single night than her own father had managed in a decade and a half. The silence that followed felt enormous, broken only by the quiet rumble of idling motorcycle engines and the distant hum of the highway beyond the property. "You all right?" Logan asked softly, turning to face her fully. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but instead something inside her finally cracked completely, and she began to cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd shed inside the shop earlier, but something deeper, more violent. 15 years of buried grief and anger, finally breaking free all at once. Logan didn't reach for her, didn't try to pull her into an embrace she hadn't invited. He simply stood beside her, steady and present, giving her exactly the space she needed to fall apart without judgment. The other riders remained respectfully at a distance, some quietly returning to their bikes, others standing watch near the perimeter, their presence a silent, unwavering wall between Emily and whatever danger still lingered in the night beyond. "I'm sorry," Emily finally managed, her voice thick with tears. "I don't know why I'm crying like this in front of complete strangers." "Nothing to apologize for," Marcus said gently, stepping closer. "Man just showed his true colors in front of a dozen people. That's a lot to process no matter how tough somebody is." Emily wiped roughly at her eyes, embarrassed but unable to fully stop the tears still falling. "I spent 15 years wondering what was wrong with me," she said. 15 years thinking maybe I wasn't worth staying for. And it turns out he never even thought about me until he needed money." "That's not a reflection of you," Logan said firmly. "That's a reflection of him. Man like that was never going to change no matter how much time passed." "How do you know that?" Emily asked, searching his face for some deeper certainty behind the statement. "Because men who actually care about the people they left behind don't show up with debt collectors trailing behind them," Logan said. "They show up alone, ready to face whatever consequences their absence created." He came here calculating an angle, not seeking forgiveness. Emily absorbed this feeling, something shift inside her chest, painful but clarifying, like a wound finally being cleaned instead of left to fester beneath the surface. "I think," she said slowly, "some part of me is almost relieved." "Relieved?" Logan asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "For 15 years, I built this fantasy version of him in my head," Emily said. "Someone who left for some noble, tragic reason, someone who thought about me every day and regretted leaving more than anything. Tonight, that fantasy is completely gone. And as painful as that is, at least now, I know the truth instead of chasing a lie." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding, evident in his weathered expression. "Truth's always better than a comfortable lie," he said, "even when it hurts like hell going down." The other riders began mounting their bikes one by one, engines rumbling back to life across the quiet lot, though none of them left immediately, seeming to wait for some silent signal that Emily was truly safe before departing. "Thank you," Emily said, addressing all of them, now her voice steadier despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. "I don't even know most of your names, but thank you for showing up like that." "Anybody would have done the same," one of the riders said, though Emily suspected, based on everything she'd learned tonight, that wasn't entirely true, that plenty of people in this world would have simply looked away, minded their own business, avoided the complication entirely. These men hadn't. "Not anybody," Emily said quietly. "I've lived 38 years in this world, and tonight is the first time strangers have shown up for me like this, without asking for anything in return." Logan's expression softened at her words, something unspoken passing between them that neither fully acknowledged aloud. One by one, the riders departed, engines fading into the distance until only Logan, Marcus, and Emily remained standing in the quiet gravel lot, the earlier chaos settling into something calmer, though far from resolved. "You should probably get some rest," Logan said gently. "It's been one hell of a night." Emily nodded, though exhaustion now felt like an entirely inadequate word for everything her body and mind had endured over the past several hours. As they walked back toward the shop entrance, Marcus falling into step beside them, Emily's phone buzzed unexpectedly in her pocket, the battery having charged enough during her earlier conversation with Logan to receive a message. She pulled it out, expecting spam or an automated notification, but instead found an unfamiliar number with a single text message displayed on the screen. "I know what your father's involved in. It's bigger than debt collectors. You need to know the truth before you decide anything else tonight. Emily's breath caught sharply in her throat, her hand trembling as she stared at the message. The fragile calm of the last few minutes shattering instantly under the weight of 6 words that suggested the night's danger was nowhere close to finished. Emily stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly, as her eyes refused to fully process what she just read. "What is it?" Logan asked, noticing the color drain from her face. She turned the phone toward him wordlessly, her hand still trembling. Logan read the message twice, his expression hardening into something more focused than concerned now. "Unknown number," he asked. "Completely unknown," Emily confirmed. "No name, no contact, saved nothing." Marcus leaned over to look as well, his brow furrowing deeply. "Somebody's watching this whole situation pretty closely to send something like that within minutes of your father driving off," he said. Emily's fingers hovered over the screen, uncertain whether responding would open a door she couldn't close again. "Should I reply?" she asked, looking between the two men, as if either might have some definitive answer. "Depends what you're trying to figure out," Logan said carefully. "If somebody wanted to hurt you, they wouldn't warn you first. Whoever sent that wants something else. Attention, maybe. Or they're trying to protect you." "Or manipulate me," Emily said. "For all I know, this could be my father again, using a different number, trying some other angle since the direct approach didn't work." "Possible," Logan admitted. "But your father didn't strike me as clever enough for something this coordinated." Despite everything, a small, humorless laugh escaped Emily's throat. "That's oddly comforting," she said. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she finally typed a response. "Who is this? What do you know?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then stood frozen, staring at the screen, waiting. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, indicating a response being typed, then disappeared, then appeared again, as if whoever was on the other end was carefully considering their words. Finally, a new message arrived. "Not safe to explain over text. Meet me tomorrow morning. Denny's off Highway 89, 8 a.m. Come alone. If you bring the bikers, I disappear, and you never learn the truth." Emily's stomach twisted painfully. "They know about you," she said, looking up at Logan. "They know I'm with you right now." Logan's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the shop's porch light, as if the sender might somehow be watching them at this very moment. "That's not a coincidence," he said. "Somebody's been tracking this whole situation closely enough to know details they shouldn't know unless they're either involved directly or watching from somewhere close." "This is insane," Emily said, running a hand through her hair, exhaustion and fear tangling together into something close to hysteria. 3 hours ago, I was just trying to find a train home. Now I've got debt collectors, an absent father with a hidden agenda, and an anonymous stranger sending cryptic warnings." "Welcome to small towns," Marcus said grimly. "Everybody knows everybody's business, especially when it involves outsiders showing up unannounced." Emily looked back down at the message, reading it again, the demand to come alone sending a fresh wave of unease through her chest. "I'm not going alone," she said firmly. "Not after everything that's happened tonight." "Good," Logan said immediately, "because I wasn't about to let you." "They said if I bring you, they disappear." "Then we won't make it obvious," Logan said. "I can be there without being visible. Sit at the counter, blend in, keep an eye on things without announcing myself as your personal bodyguard." Emily considered this, some of the tension in her shoulders easing slightly at the thought of not facing this alone. "You'd really do that?" she asked. "After everything already happened tonight, you could just wash your hands of this whole situation. Nobody would blame you." Logan's expression turned serious, something steady and unwavering settling into his features. "Told you already," he said. "I don't drive past people who need help. Doesn't matter if the danger's already passed or if there's more still coming. You're not facing this by yourself." Emily felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Despite the fear still coursing through her veins, a feeling she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember, the sensation of someone actually choosing to stay. "Okay," she said, exhaling slowly. "Tomorrow morning, Denny's, 8 a.m. She typed a quick response confirming the meeting, her fingers steadier now than they'd been minutes earlier. "I'll be there, alone like you asked." The lie felt strange, leaving her fingertips, but necessary, a small deception in service of her own safety. The 3 dots appeared once more, then a final message. "Good. And Emily, be careful who you trust right now. Not everyone circling you tonight has good intentions, even the ones who seem like they're helping." Emily's blood ran cold as she read the words a second time, her eyes lifting slowly toward Logan. "What?" he asked, immediately noticing her expression shift. She handed him the phone silently. Logan read the message, his jaw tightening as he processed the implication clearly directed toward himself and the other riders who had shown up tonight. "They're trying to plant doubt," Marcus said, reading over Logan's shoulder. "Classic manipulation tactic, make you question the one person who's actually shown you kindness tonight. Or they genuinely know something I don't," Emily said carefully, watching Logan's reaction closely. "I only met you a few hours ago. I don't actually know anything about you beyond what you've told me yourself." The words hung heavy in the air, and Emily immediately regretted the accusatory edge that had crept into her voice, though some cautious part of her refused to fully retract it either. Logan's expression remained steady, though something flickered behind his eyes. Hurt perhaps, or simply weary, familiarity with being doubted despite his intentions. "That's fair," he said quietly. "You don't know me. Everything I've told you could be a lie dressed up nice with a sad backstory and some charity photos on a corkboard." "That's not what I meant," Emily said quickly, though even she wasn't entirely certain what she'd meant. "It's all right," Logan said. "After the night you've had questioning everybody makes sense. I'd probably do the same in your position." Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly, shifting his weight between his feet. "For what it's worth," he said, "I've known Logan 12 years. Man's never once given me a reason to doubt him. But you're right that trust has to be earned, not just handed over because somebody says the right things at the right moment." Emily appreciated the honesty, though it did little to fully settle the unease now churning in her stomach. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is all happening too fast." "Understandable," Logan said, stepping back slightly, giving her physical space that mirrored the emotional distance she seemed to need in that moment. "The couch is still available if you want to rest. I'll be right outside if you need anything, and I mean that literally. I won't come back inside unless you ask me to." Emily studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of manipulation, any crack in the steady sincerity he'd maintained since the moment they'd met. She found none, though the anonymous message's warning continued echoing uncomfortably in the back of her mind. "Thank you," she said finally, though the words felt smaller and more hesitant than they had earlier that night. Logan nodded once and stepped outside Marcus, following behind him, leaving Emily alone in the warm quiet of the shop for the first time since she'd arrived. She sank onto the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest, staring at her phone screen, as if it might offer some additional clue she'd missed. Sleep felt impossible, her mind cycling relentlessly through the events of the night, her father's desperate confession, the sudden arrival of backup riders, the anonymous warning now casting suspicion over the one person who had shown her genuine kindness. She must have drifted off eventually despite everything, because she woke with a start, sometime later, sunlight beginning to filter faintly through the shop's front windows, her neck stiff from sleeping upright on the ancient couch cushions Logan had joked about earlier. She checked her phone. 6:45 in the morning. A knock sounded softly at the door, and Emily's heart jumped before she recognized Logan's silhouette through the window holding 2 coffee cups. She opened the door cautiously. "Morning," Logan said, his voice gentle. "Figured you might need actual coffee before facing whatever's waiting at that diner." Emily accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" she asked, noticing the exhaustion etched into his features. "Kept watch most of the night," Logan admitted. "Didn't feel right leaving you unprotected after everything that happened, especially with an unknown player suddenly involved." Emily felt a fresh wave of guilt for the suspicion she'd voiced hours earlier. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what I said last night, about not knowing if I could trust you." "Don't apologize," Logan said firmly. "You had every right to question things. Smart actually considering everything stacked against you last night." "Still," Emily said, "you've done nothing but help since the moment you saw me on that platform. Doesn't seem fair that I'd repay that by doubting you." Logan offered a tired smile. "Trust isn't about fairness," he said. "It's earned slowly, especially after a night like the one you just had. I'm not offended, just want you safe, whatever that requires." Emily sipped her coffee, the bitter warmth helping clear some of the remaining fog from her exhausted mind. "We should get moving," she said, glancing at the time. "Diner's 15 minutes away, and I don't want to be late." "Or early," Logan said. "Gives whoever's meeting you time to get comfortable, maybe drop their guard a little before we walk in." Emily nodded, appreciating the strategic thinking she hadn't considered herself. They rode together in tense silence, Emily gripping Logan's waist tighter than she had the previous night, though this time the fear wasn't directed at him, but at whatever awaited them at their destination. The diner came into view exactly at 8, a modest building with a faded sign and a handful of cars scattered across the parking lot. Logan parked the motorcycle at the far edge of the lot, deliberately out of direct line of sight from the diner's main windows. "I'll go in first," he said. "Sit at the counter, keep my back to the door so it doesn't look suspicious. You come in a few minutes after, like you're meeting someone you don't know yet." Emily nodded, her heart pounding steadily harder with each passing second. "What if it's a trap?" she asked. "What if this whole thing is designed to separate us?" "Then I'll be 20 feet away instead of standing directly beside you," Logan said. "Not perfect, but better than nothing." Emily watched him walk toward the diner entrance, disappearing inside, and forced herself to wait the agreed-upon few minutes despite every instinct urging her to follow immediately. When she finally entered the bell above the door announcing her arrival, her eyes scanned the room, quickly searching for anyone who might be watching for her. A woman sitting alone in a corner booth caught her attention immediately. Dark hair, perhaps mid-40s, nervously turning a coffee cup between her hands. Emily approached slowly. "Are you the one who texted me?" she asked quietly. The woman looked up, relief and anxiety mixing across her features. "Sit down," she said. "Quickly, please." Emily slid into the booth across from her, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Who are you?" Emily asked. "How do you know my father?" The woman glanced nervously around the diner before answering, her eyes briefly catching on Logan, seated at the counter, though she gave no indication of recognizing him. "My name is Patricia," she said. "I used to be your father's girlfriend, about 6 years ago." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the revelation. "I didn't know he had a girlfriend," she said. "There's a lot you don't know about him," Patricia said, her voice edged with old, unresolved bitterness. "He left me too eventually, just like he left you and your mother." "Why are you telling me this now?" Emily asked. "Why does this matter tonight?" Patricia leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice further. "Because the debt he owes isn't just money," she said. "It's connected to something much worse. Your father used to work for a man named Victor Alvarez, moving things across state lines that definitely weren't legal. When your father wanted out, he took something with him. Insurance, he called it. Something that could put Victor away for a very long time if it ever reached the right people." Emily's stomach twisted painfully. "What kind of something?" she asked. "Documents," Patricia said. "Financial records, shipment and logs, names of people involved. Your father hid it somewhere years ago, told me once when he was drunk and feeling sentimental, before he disappeared from my life too." "Why would he tell you that?" "Because he trusted me once," Patricia said, bitterness flooding her voice. "Before he left me exactly the same way he left you. Difference is, I've spent years trying to find a way to use what I know to protect myself in case Victor's people ever came looking for me too." Emily's mind raced, trying to process everything, trying to understand how this connected to the men who had circled her at the train station, to her father's desperate appearance at Logan's shop. "So those men last night," she said slowly, "they're not just debt collectors. They work for Victor," Patricia confirmed. "Your father's 30-day deadline isn't about repaying money. It's about producing those documents or facing consequences far worse than debt collection." "And he thinks I know where they are?" Emily asked, confusion evident in her voice. Patricia hesitated, something calculating flickering behind her eyes. "He thinks your mother might have known," she said carefully, "might have hidden something among her belongings before she passed. That's the real reason he came looking for you, Emily. Not guilt, not love. He needs those documents, and he thinks you might unknowingly have them." Emily felt the floor tilt beneath her, the pieces of the last 24 hours rearranging themselves into a picture far more dangerous than she'd imagined. "The letters," she whispered suddenly. "What letters?" Patricia asked, leaning forward sharply. Emily's heart pounded as she recalled the box of letters she'd found in her mother's closet after the funeral, the same letters that had led her to Arizona in the first place. "My mother kept letters he sent over the years," Emily said slowly. "I only read a few of them, the ones with apologies and the address. There could be more in that box I never fully went through." Patricia's expression shifted, something sharp and hungry crossing her features before she carefully composed herself again. "Where's that box now?" she asked, her voice deliberately casual, though Emily caught the underlying urgency. Something cold slid down Emily's spine. "Why does that matter to you?" she asked, suspicion suddenly flooding her voice. "If you're just trying to warn me, why do you need to know where the letters are?" Patricia's composure cracked slightly, her eyes darting toward the door as if calculating an exit. "I told you," she said. "I've spent years trying to protect myself from Victor's people. If those documents exist and I can find them first, I can use them as leverage, negotiate my own safety. So you're not trying to help me, Emily said, understanding, crystallizing painfully clear. You're trying to use me to find something valuable exactly like my father is. It's not that simple, Patricia said quickly, though her tone had lost its earlier warmth entirely. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to leave, she said. Emily, wait, Patricia said, reaching across the table, though Emily stepped back before she could be touched. Across the diner, Logan had already turned from the counter, alert to the sudden shift in Emily's body language, moving toward them without hesitation. Everything all right? He asked, positioning himself protectively near Emily. We're leaving, Emily said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger and fear. Patricia's eyes widened slightly as recognition finally dawned on her features. You're the biker from last night, she said, looking at Logan properly for the first time. And you're clearly not here to protect anybody but yourself, Logan replied evenly. Emily, let's go. As they turned toward the exit, Patricia's voice called out behind them, sharp with sudden desperation. You don't understand what you're walking away from, she said. Victor's people won't stop looking, not for your father, not for me, and not for you either now that you're involved. Finding those documents isn't just about greed anymore. It's about survival. Emily paused at the door, turning back slightly. If that's true, she said, then you should have led with honesty instead of manipulation. She pushed through the door up into the early morning sunlight, Logan close behind her, both moving quickly toward the motorcycle parked at the lot's edge. You okay? Logan asked as they reached the bike. No, Emily admitted, her hands trembling as she processed everything Patricia had revealed. This is so much bigger than I thought. My father's not just some deadbeat who abandoned his family. He's tangled up in something dangerous, and now apparently I'm tangled up in it too because of some documents I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago. Did she say where they might be? Logan asked. No, Emily said, but she confirmed there might be more in that box of letters. Letters I left back in Seattle. Logan's expression grew serious. Then we need to figure out our next move carefully, he said, because if Patricia figured out the connection to those letters, there's a good chance Victor's people will eventually reach the same conclusion. Emily's phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket, and she pulled it out with trembling hands, terrified of what new complication awaited. The screen displayed a message from an unknown number, different from Patricia's earlier texts, the words sending fresh ice through Emily's veins. We know about the letters, Miss Carter. We know about the shop where you're hiding. You have until tonight to hand over what we're looking for, or your new biker friends will learn exactly how dangerous curiosity can be. Emily's hand shook so violently, the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Logan caught her wrist, gently steadying her, his eyes scanning the message over her shoulder. They know where the shop is, she whispered. They know about you, about everyone. Logan's jaw hardened, but his voice stayed level, deliberate. Then we stop reacting and start deciding. Get on the bike. They rode back in silence, the wind no longer feeling like freedom the way it had the night before, but like a countdown. By the time they pulled into the gravel lot, Marcus was already waiting, arms crossed, his face grim. Got your message, Marcus said. Already called the others. They're coming. How many? Logan asked. All of them, Marcus said simply. Emily climbed off the bike legs, unsteady, staring at the growing collection of motorcycles rolling in one after another, engines rumbling low like distant thunder building into a storm. Within 20 minutes, nearly 24 riders filled the lot, men and women of every age, every background, all wearing the same pet she had once feared, all standing now like a wall between her and whatever was coming. This is insane, Emily said quietly to Logan. You don't even know these people are really coming for me. Maybe it's an empty threat. Maybe, Logan said. But Frank taught me a long time ago, you don't wait to find out if a threat's real after somebody gets hurt. You prepare like it is, and you're relieved if it isn't. Emily's phone buzzed again. Another message, this one shorter, colder. Clock's ticking, Miss Carter. 6 hours. She showed it to Logan, who read it once, then turned to the gathered riders. We've got 6 hours, he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Whoever these people are, they think a scared woman and a small-town shop are easy targets. We're going to prove them wrong, but we're going to do it smart, not reckless. Nobody throws the first punch. Nobody gives them an excuse to call this anything but self-defense if it comes to that. Heads nodded around the circle, expressions hardening with quiet resolve. There's something else, Emily said, stepping forward, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. This isn't just about me anymore. There might be documents evidence against a man named Victor Alvarez hidden somewhere among my mother's belongings. If that's true, calling the police might actually end this permanently instead of just delaying it. Logan looked at her, something like admiration flickering behind his tired eyes. You sure about that? He asked. Going to the police means everything comes out. Your father's involvement, whatever mess he's tangled in. I know, Emily said, but I'm done protecting a man who never once protected me. If this ends the threat for good, then it's worth whatever comes out. Marcus stepped forward. I know a detective in Prescott, works organized crime cases, sometimes cross-referenced with the state. Owes me a favor from a few years back. I can make a call. Do it, Logan said. While Marcus stepped aside with his phone, Emily pulled out her own, scrolling through her contacts until she found her cousin back in Seattle, the only family member who still had access to her mother's storage unit. Her hands shook as she dialed. Hey, Rachel, it's Emily, she said when the call connected. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it right now. She explained quickly, urgently, about the box of letters, asking Rachel to search through the entire contents. Not just the letters she'd already read, but everything, every scrap of paper that might be hidden beneath them. There should be a storage unit key in Mom's jewelry box, Emily said. Please, Rachel, this is important. I'll explain everything later, I promise. Rachel, sensing the urgency in her cousin's voice, agreed without much argument, promising to call back within the hour. Emily hung up, her heart pounding. Now we wait, she said. Now we wait, Logan agreed, and we make sure nothing happens to you while we do. The next hour crawled by with agonizing slowness. Riders positioned themselves strategically around the property, some watching the main road, others patrolling the perimeter on foot, all maintaining the same calm, disciplined vigilance Emily had witnessed the night before. Emily sat inside the shop, staring at her phone, willing it to ring. When it finally did, she answered before the first ring even finished. Rachel, did you find anything? Emily, oh my God, Rachel's voice came through, breathless and shaken. There's a folder taped to the bottom of the box. Financial statements shown, shipping manifests, and, Emily, there's a flash drive too, labeled with a date from 6 years ago. Emily's chest tightened with a mixture of vindication and fear. Can you photograph everything and send it to me right now? She asked. Already doing it, Rachel said. Emily waited, watching the screen until a series of images began loading financial documents covered in numbers and names she didn't recognize. Shipping records referencing routes across 3 states in one page that made her blood run cold. A handwritten note in her father's unmistakable handwriting. If anything happens to me, this proves everything. Victor Alvarez ordered the shipment that killed my brother. I couldn't prove it in court, but I kept everything anyway. Someday this will matter. Emily stared at the words, her mind reeling. Logan, she called, her voice cracking. Logan, come look at this. He crossed the room quickly, reading the message over her shoulder, his expression darkening. Your father had a brother, he asked. I never knew, Emily whispered. He never mentioned an uncle, never mentioned any of this. 15 years and I never even knew I had an uncle who died because of this man. Marcus re-entered the shop just then, phone still in hand. Talk to Detective Reyes, he said. She's very interested. Apparently, Victor Alvarez has been under federal investigation for years, but nobody's ever had solid evidence connecting him directly to anything. If what you're describing is real, this could be exactly what they've been missing. Send her everything, Emily said, immediately forwarding the images from Rachel without hesitation. All of it. I don't care what happens to my father anymore. I care about ending this. Marcus relayed the information quickly, his expression shifting from concern to cautious hope as the conversation continued. She wants you to come in and give a formal statement, Marcus said, lowering the phone. Says if this evidence holds up, they can move on Victor's operation within days, maybe hours if they act fast enough. What about the men threatening me? Emily asked. What about tonight's deadline? She's sending units to patrol the area immediately, Marcus said. Wants you somewhere safe until they can secure things properly. Logan turned to Emily, his expression steady but urgent. You up for that, giving a statement, putting your name on all of this? Emily took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily but clearly across her shoulders. I've spent 15 years running from questions about my father, she said. I'm done running. If telling the truth ends this for good, then yes, I'm ready. An hour later, Emily sat inside a small interview room at the Prescott Police Department, Logan waiting just outside despite Detective Reyes' initial hesitation about allowing him inside the building at all. He saved my life last night, Emily had said firmly. He stays close or I don't say anything. Rhea, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, eventually relented, allowing Logan to wait in the adjacent hallway visible through the interview room's window. Emily recounted everything: the train station, the pickup truck, her father's arrival, Patricia's warning, the threatening messages, her voice growing steadier with each detail despite the exhaustion dragging at her body. This is remarkably thorough, Reyes said, reviewing the documents Rachel had sent. If these financial records check out, combined with your father's handwritten statement, we may finally have enough to move against Alvarez's entire operation. What happens to my father? Emily asked quietly. Reyes's expression softened slightly. Given his involvement, he'll likely face charges too, but if he cooperates, testifies against Alvarez, it could significantly reduce whatever sentence he's facing. Emily absorbed this feeling, no particular satisfaction, no vindictive relief, just a hollow acknowledgement of consequences, finally catching up to choices made long ago. Can I see him? She asked suddenly, surprising herself with the request. That's your decision, Reyes said. He's currently being held for questioning at the county station. I can arrange a brief visit if you want one. Emily glanced toward the window, meeting Logan's steady gaze through the glass. I need to do this, she said, though. Whether to Reyes or herself, she wasn't entirely sure. An hour later, Emily sat across from her father in a small visitation room, a thick pane of glass separating them, a phone receiver in each of their hands. Richard looked smaller than he had the night before, the desperation in his eyes now tinged with something closer to shame. You gave them everything, he said, his voice hollow through the receiver. I gave them the truth, Emily corrected. Something you should have done 15 years ago. I was trying to protect you, Richard said, both times, leaving and coming back. You were trying to protect yourself, Emily said, though the anger she expected to feel had dulled into something closer to exhausted clarity. Both times. Richard's eyes filled with tears, though Emily no longer felt the desperate need to interpret their sincerity. I had a brother, she said quietly. You never told me. Danny, Richard said, his voice breaking. He was younger than me. Got involved with Alvarez's operation before I did, tried to get out when he realized what they were really transporting. They killed him, made it look like an accident. I spent years trying to build a case, and when I couldn't, I probably hid everything, told myself someday I'd find the right way to use it. Instead, you tried to use me, Emily said. Richard had no response for that, his silence confirming what neither of them needed spoken aloud. I hope you get whatever help you actually need, Emily said, finally standing up. But I'm done waiting for you to become someone you clearly never were. She hung up the receiver and walked out without looking back, feeling something inside her finally settle, not healed exactly, but released from 15 years of desperate hope that had never served her. Logan was waiting exactly where she'd left him, his expression unreadable but patient. You good? He asked. I think so, Emily said. For the first time in a long time, I think I actually am. 3 days later, Detective Reyes called with updates. Federal agents had moved swiftly on Alvarez's operation, arresting him along with several associates on charges ranging from racketeering to accessory to murder, the evidence Emily had provided, proving instrumental in finally building a case strong enough to hold. Emily received the news standing in Logan's workshop, watching Sophie's small, purple motorcycle nearing completion, its butterfly details now fully painted courtesy of hours Emily herself had spent with a paintbrush over the past 2 days. They got him, she said, lowering her phone slowly. Alvarez is in custody, permanently this time. Logan looked up from the workbench, relief visible across his tired features. And your father, he asked. Cooperating fully, Emily said. Reyes said his testimony is crucial. Might get a reduced sentence, but he's not walking away clean. How do you feel about that? Logan asked carefully. Emily considered the question, surprised by how calm her answer felt. Relieved, she said. Not for him. For me. For the first time since I was 12 years old, I'm not waiting for answers anymore. I have them even if they're not the ones I hoped for. Logan set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag, studying her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as something deeper than simple concern. What happens now? He asked. You planning on heading back to Seattle? Emily hesitated, the question catching her off guard despite having asked herself the same thing countless times over the past 3 days. I don't know, she admitted. There's nothing really waiting for me there anymore. No job I can't do remotely. No family beyond distant cousins. Nothing except an apartment full of memories I'm not sure I'm ready to face yet. And here, Logan asked, his voice carefully neutral, though something hopeful flickered beneath the surface. Here I've got, Emily paused, searching for the right words. Here I've got people who showed up for me without knowing anything about me, who kept showing up even when I doubted them, even when everything about that first night should have taught me to run the other direction. That's not nothing, Logan said quietly. No, Emily agreed. It's not. That weekend, the entire chapter gathered for Sophie's bike presentation, the 6-year-old's frail, delighted laughter echoing across the shop's back lot, and as 24 riders formed a slow, careful procession around her, her small hands gripping the purple handlebars, while her parents watched with tears streaming freely down their faces. Emily stood beside Logan, watching the scene unfold, feeling something settle permanently into place inside her chest. She's beautiful, Emily said softly, watching Sophie's delighted expression. Doctors gave her maybe 2 more months, Logan said quietly. But today, she's just a kid on a motorcycle surrounded by people who love her. That's enough, Emily said. That's more than enough. Sophie's father approached them afterwards, shaking Logan's hand firmly before turning to Emily. Logan told us you helped paint it, he said. Butterflies were Sophie's favorite. You have no idea what this means to us. I think I do, Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. More than I would have a week ago anyway. As the celebration wound down, riders slowly departing Sophie's family, driving away with their daughter's small motorcycle carefully secured in their truck bed, Logan and Emily found themselves alone again in the quiet workshop, the same space where everything had truly begun to shift for both of them. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Always, Logan replied. That first night, she said, when you stopped at the station, did you have any idea what you were walking into? Logan considered the question seriously before answering. No, he admitted. Just saw someone who needed help and figured the rest would work itself out. It nearly got a lot more complicated than either of us expected, Emily said. Most important things usually do, Logan replied. Emily studied him for a long moment, weighing the words she'd been considering for days now. I've been offered a job, she said suddenly. Remote position graphic design work for a nonprofit that supports veteran services. Pays well enough flexible hours. That's great, Logan said, though something cautious entered his voice, as if bracing for news that might take her away. It doesn't matter where I'm based, Emily continued. I could do it from anywhere. Understanding dawned slowly across Logan's features. Anywhere like Prescott, Arizona, he asked. Anywhere like Prescott, Arizona, Emily confirmed, a small smile finally breaking through the exhaustion and grief that had defined her for so long. Logan's answering smile was slow, genuine, carrying none of the careful restraint he'd maintained since the night they'd met. Frank always said this shop had a way of finding exactly the people who needed to be here, he said. Guess he was right about that too. Guess he was, Emily agreed. 6 months later, Emily stood among hundreds of motorcycles gathered for the chapter's annual memorial ride, honoring members who had passed, brothers who had given everything for causes both public and deeply personal. She no longer flinched at the sight of leather vests and unfamiliar faces, no longer categorized every rider she encountered by old fears, absorbed from movies and secondhand warnings. She saw fathers, veterans, mechanics who spent weekends building tiny motorcycles for dying children. Men and women who understood in ways she was only beginning to fully grasp that family wasn't defined by blood or biology, but by who showed up when everything else in the world had already driven away. Logan approached her as the engines began their slow, thunderous procession down Main Street, hundreds of riders honoring memory and loss and unbreakable loyalty in a single unified voice. He pressed something small into her palm, a silver keychain, simple and unadorned, except for 4 words engraved carefully across its surface. You're safe now. Emily stared at it, her throat tightening with emotion too large for words. Frank gave one just like this to every person he helped over the years, Logan said. Told me once it wasn't really about the club or the patch. It was about that exact moment somebody chooses to stop when everybody else keeps driving. Emily closed her fingers around the keychain, feeling its weight settle into her palm like something far heavier than metal, something closer to a promise finally kept after 15 years of waiting. Thank you, she whispered, for stopping. Thank you, Logan replied, for staying. As the procession rolled forward beneath the wide Arizona sky engines roaring in unified thunder, Emily Carter finally understood something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The family she had spent 15 years searching for had never been waiting behind a locked door on Larkspur Avenue. It had been waiting on a dark train platform at midnight, wearing a patch she'd once been taught to fear, offering nothing but coffee, honesty, and the simple, unwavering choice to stop when everyone else kept driving. She had come to Arizona chasing a ghost. She left it having found a home. And somewhere out on that open highway beneath a setting Arizona sun, surrounded by 100 strangers who had become family, in the span of half a year, Emily, Carter finally, completely without a shadow of doubt remaining, knew exactly where she belonged.